Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
South Korea is famous around the world. People know it for amazing technology, like smartphones and fast internet. K-pop music and Korean dramas are also very popular. Because of these things, South Korea looks like a modern and successful country. However, if you look closer, you see another picture. Inside South Korea, there are challenges. One is political corruption. In the past, some leaders were accused of doing wrong things. This shows problems in politics. Another important thing is the power of big family companies called chaebols. Samsung, Hyundai, and LG are chaebols, groups of companies owned by families. These families are rich and powerful. They have a big influence on the economy and government. These companies started small, but grew big with government help. Life in South Korea can be hard. It costs a lot of money to live there, especially in cities like Seoul. Houses are very expensive. There is also much competition. People feel pressure to be successful in school and work. Young people often think it is hard to get a good job. South Korea seems very modern and rich from outside, but inside there are complex issues. This book will explore these issues. We will look at the history and current situation to understand South Korea better. We will see the real story behind its success and challenges. 2. Early days. Choson was the old name for Korea. In the past, Choson was a country that preferred to be alone. Like Japan and China, Choson was not as fast to modernize as countries in Europe. For a long time, Choson stayed closed to the outside world, but eventually it had to open its doors to foreign powers. Japan, being close to Choson, became a major influence. In 1876, Japan used its power to make Choson sign a special agreement called a treaty. This treaty gave Japan important advantages. Japanese ships could freely use 3 ports in Choson: Busan, Incheon, and Wonsan. This was good for Japan to sell its products and to get stronger near China, its rival. Japanese cloth and clothes were sold a lot in Choson. In return, Japan bought cheap rice from Choson. Rice was important food for workers in Japan. This trade made Choson more reliant on Japan. China, which had been a longtime friend of Choson, advised Choson to make agreements with other countries as well. China did not want Choson to depend only on Japan, so Choson also made treaties with countries like the United States, England, Italy, and Russia. These Western countries saw Choson as a new place to trade and a weak country they could use to become stronger in Asia. This attention from foreign countries started to change Choson. It began to move away from a traditional society to a more capitalist one. However, these changes also brought problems for ordinary people in Choson. The import of cheap textiles from Japan and other countries damaged local weavers and businesses. Food prices increased because landowners started selling rice overseas for more money. Some people became wealthy, building big houses and employing servants. But many more people became poorer than before. Japanese companies started to become dominant in the country's economy. In 1894, a big uprising happened in Choson. It was called the Tonghak Peasant Revolution. To stop this revolt, the Choson government asked China for military help. China had been a supporter of Choson for a long time. Japan saw this as a threat to its growing influence in Choson. Japan used the excuse that China brought troops illegally and sent its own army to Choson. This started the First Sino-Japanese War. Japan was more modern and stronger, and it won the war. After Japan's victory, China had to give up control of Taiwan and recognize Choson as fully independent. In 1897, the king of Choson declared the country a new empire, called the Korean Empire. He became the first emperor. This was meant to show that Korea was a strong, independent nation. But in reality, the Korean Empire became more dependent on Japan. Pro-Japanese officials gained power, and Japanese companies controlled important industries. By the early 1900s, Japan had become the main power in Korea. 3. Under Japan's rule, Japan started to take control of Korea step by step. In 1876, Japan made Korea sign a treaty. This treaty allowed Japan to use ports in Korea for trade. Japan wanted to sell its goods in Korea and to have a place to build power near China. Japan began to sell cloth in Korea, and Korea sold rice to Japan. Later, Korea became the Korean Empire, but Japan's power was growing. In 1905, Korea became a protectorate of Japan. This meant Japan controlled Korea. Japan started to make Koreans more like Japanese. They wanted Koreans to learn Japanese, sometimes change their religion, and use Japanese names. This time under Japan was also a time of economic change in Korea. The amount of things made in farming, fishing, and factories increased a lot. New things came to Seoul, like electricity, trains, and telephones. Japan built factories and railways in Korea. This was good for Japan because Korea became a place to get food and sell products. This also started the basis for the modern economy of South Korea. During this time, some Koreans started businesses. Lee Byung-chul started Samsung. At first, Samsung was a small shop selling things like noodles and dried fish to China. Koo In-hoi started a business making toothpaste powder. This became very popular and later became Lucky Toothpaste, which is now LG. Chung Ju-young started a car repair shop. Cars at that time needed a lot of repair. His business grew. During World War II, Korea was under Japanese rule. Korea was used to get resources for Japan. Koreans had to work in factories and fight in the Japanese army. After Japan lost the war, Korea became free from Japan. 4. Division and War. In 1945, Japan lost World War II. Korea was free from Japanese rule. However, Korea did not become one country. Two powerful countries, the Soviet Union and the United States, made a decision. They divided Korea into two parts. The line they used was the 38th parallel. The Soviet Union took control of the area north of this line. The United States controlled the area south of the line. This division was meant to be temporary. The idea was to help Korea become independent, but it did not work out as planned. In the north, with the support of the Soviet Union, a communist government was formed. They called it North Korea. In the south, with the support of the United States, a different kind of government was set up. It was called South Korea. Each part had its own leader and its own ideas about how the country should be run. These two Koreas saw each other as enemies. They had very different political systems. North Korea became a communist state. South Korea aimed to be a democratic country. Both sides believed they were the true Korea. In 1950, war broke out. North Korea attacked South Korea. This was the start of the Korean War. It was a very difficult and bloody war. Many countries got involved, including the United States and China. The war lasted for 3 years. The Korean War was terrible for both North and South Korea. Many people died. Cities and towns were destroyed. The economies of both countries were badly damaged. Families were separated. In 1953, the war stopped, but it did not end with a peace treaty. Instead, they signed an armistice. An armistice is like a ceasefire. It means the fighting stopped, but the war is not officially over. To this day, Korea is still divided. There is a border between North and South Korea called the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ. It is a heavily guarded area. The two Koreas are still technically at war. They live in a state of tension and separation. 5. Building the economy. After the Korean War, South Korea faced many economic problems. The war destroyed much of the country. It was a difficult time to rebuild and start again. South Korea did not have many natural resources compared to North Korea. However, South Korea received help from the United States. From 1954 to 1959, the U.S. gave about $1.5 billion to South Korea. This money was very important to help the country recover. One of the first things South Korea did was land reform. The government bought land from big landowners and sold it to farmers for a low price. This helped more people own land and reduced inequality. During this time, some companies started to grow quickly. Remember Chung Ju-young? His car repair business, Hyundai, grew bigger. After the war, he started it again. Hyundai began to repair cars and also build things. They built infrastructure and even barracks for American soldiers. Because of this, Hyundai got bigger contracts from the government. Lee Byung-chul, who had a small food business called Samsung, also grew. During the war, he lost his business, but after, he got government contracts to supply food. Samsung built a sugar factory and later made wool fabric. They even bought a bank. Koo In-wai, who made Lucky toothpaste powder, also started a company called Lucky Chemical. They made cream and then the first Korean toothpaste, Lucky. Lucky was popular because it used plastic jars, which was new at the time. Lucky Chemical even started making plastic itself. The South Korean government wanted to develop the economy quickly, especially heavy industry and technology. They decided to support some companies to become very big instead of many small companies. They thought this would be faster to grow the economy and compete with other countries. So, the government supported companies like Lucky Chemical. Lucky Chemical created a company called Gold Star to make electronics like radios. Later, Gold Star made refrigerators and air conditioners. In the future, Gold Star and Lucky Chemical would become LG. Samsung also started making electronics, especially televisions. Hyundai started to build big things like highways and ships. They also started making cars. These big companies, like Hyundai, Samsung, and LG, were family businesses that grew very large with government help. They became known as chaebols, which means rich family. The government worked closely with these chaebols. It was easier to support a few big companies than many small ones. This plan to build the economy by supporting chaebols was successful at first. Chaebols produced goods cheaply because of their size and workers. They sold these goods to other countries and earned money. This money was used to buy new technology and equipment. South Korea's economy grew very fast. A poor country became a center for new ideas and technology. However, this system of relying on chaebols also created problems that would be seen later. 6. The chaebol system. After the Korean War, South Korea wanted to become a strong economy quickly. The government decided to help big family businesses, called chaebols. The idea was that these large companies could grow fast and lead the country's economic development. The government gave them money and support to build factories and businesses. Chaebols are not just one company. They are groups of many companies that are connected and controlled by one family. For example, think about Hyundai. Hyundai is famous for cars, but it's also involved in many other things. Hyundai has companies that build ships, construct buildings, and even make weapons. These different companies are all part of the Hyundai chaebol and are controlled by the Chung family. This is how chaebols work. They have many businesses in different areas, giving them a lot of power in the economy. Because chaebols were so important for the economy, they became very close to the government. This close relationship was not always good. Sometimes, chaebols used their power to get special favors from the government. This led to corruption. There were cases where chaebols gave money to politicians to get help with their businesses. This was not fair and sometimes illegal. South Korea has had several big corruption scandals involving chaebols and presidents. For example, one president, Park Geun-hye, was removed from her job because of corruption. She was accused of taking bribes from big companies, including Samsung. The head of Samsung, Lee Jae-young, was also sent to prison for giving bribes to a friend of the president. These cases show how much influence chaebols have and how corruption can be a problem. Even when presidents and chaebol leaders are found guilty of corruption, they often do not face serious consequences for long. In South Korea, it is common for presidents to pardon business leaders who are in prison. For example, the Samsung head who was jailed for bribery was later pardoned and released. This means that even when people are caught doing wrong, they sometimes get forgiven and are not punished fully. This lack of strong punishment is a problem, and it can make people think that the rules are not fair for everyone. The chaebol system helped South Korea grow very fast after the war. However, it also created problems like corruption and too much power in the hands of a few families. Many people in South Korea today are worried about the power of chaebols and want things to be more fair. The close relationship between chaebols and the government is a complex issue that continues to affect South Korean society and its economy. 7. Crisis and change. In the past, big companies in South Korea, called chaebols, grew very quickly. They borrowed a lot of money to expand. By the 1990s, many chaebols had large debts. They were not very efficient, but because they were so big, they controlled much of the economy. In 1997, a big financial crisis hit Asia. This crisis also affected South Korea badly. Many companies could not pay back their debts. Some chaebols went bankrupt. People lost their jobs, and unemployment increased quickly. Life became very difficult for many South Koreans. One very big company that failed was Daewoo. It was a huge chaebol, but it had too much debt. The government had to step in to manage the crisis. They helped to reorganize the economy. Some companies were closed, and others were sold. This was a painful time of change for South Korea. Slowly, the South Korean economy started to recover. The government made some changes to how companies were managed. However, chaebols remained very powerful. After the crisis, they were still important for the economy. They continued to be big players in South Korea, even though the crisis showed some of their weaknesses. The events of 1997 were a big shock and led to some changes. But the main structure of the South Korean economy with strong chaebols stayed in place. 8. Life in South Korea today. Today, South Korea looks like a very modern and successful country. Many people around the world enjoy Korean music and dramas. South Korean companies like Samsung and LG are famous for technology. However, Life in South Korea for many people is not easy. One big problem is inequality. Some families, called chaebols, are very rich and powerful. They own many big companies and have a lot of influence. Many young Koreans feel that life is unfair because of this. They think it is hard to succeed if you are not from a rich family or connected to these powerful groups. Education is very important in South Korea. There is a lot of pressure to do well in school and go to a top university. Students study very hard for many hours every day. Parents spend a lot of money on extra lessons to help their children get ahead. This competition for good education starts very early in life. Finding a job is also difficult, especially for young people. Many educated young Koreans are unemployed. They want to work for big companies like chaebols because these companies pay well. But there are not enough jobs for everyone. This makes young people feel stressed and worried about their future. Work culture in South Korea can be very demanding. People often work long hours and feel a lot of pressure to perform well. This can lead to stress and mental health problems. To deal with stress, some people drink alcohol a lot. South Korea has high rates of stress and mental health issues compared to other countries. Chaebols are still very important in South Korea. They help the country become rich and developed, but they also have a lot of power. It is difficult to change the system because chaebols are deeply connected to the economy and government. Many people believe that reforms are needed to make life fairer and reduce the power of these big families. So, while South Korea appears modern and prosperous from the outside, inside, many people face challenges. There is a feeling of unfairness and intense competition. The pressure to succeed is high, and life can be very stressful. The power of chaebols continues to shape society and the economy, creating a complex reality for ordinary South Koreans.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.